Duke Nukem is a side-scrolling platform game released in 1991. Although most people will know the Duke Nukem franchise for its toilet humor and adult-oriented content, Apogee originally made the first two games as a kid-friendly side-scroller. Taking place in the then-future world of 1997, Dr. Proton is determined to take over the world. He sends his army of mechanized killing machines for the takeover, and all military resistance had failed. As a last resort, the CIA sends in Duke Nukem to stop him. You know, the standard stuff. You go around the levels collecting keys to unlock doors and items for points. Your goal is to reach the exit at the end of each level. Duke only has one weapon, the atomic pistol, which he can obtain upgrades for to increase the number of simultaneous shots on screen. He cannot fire up or down, so well-timed jump shots are used to attack airborne enemies. He also cannot crouch, but he fires his weapon low enough that it can hit enemies on the ground. Soda and turkey gives you 1 health. If you shoot the turkey, it gets cooked and gives you 2 health instead. However, if you shoot the soda can, it blows up instead. I thought both of these were interesting concepts. You can also pick up boots to jump higher, and a grappling hook to move across certain ceilings. The enemies range from small robots and alien wall crawlers to large mechs and helicopters. Nothing really stood out about them. They seemed as if they were only there to give the player something to shoot at. It's the same thing with the boss you encounter at the final level of each episode. They're nothing special. I have mixed thoughts on the level design. Some levels have a variety of diverse areas, some platforming sections, some open areas for fighting stronger monsters, and some interesting things like conveyor belts. Those levels were awesome. Then there were the levels that were just annoying. This level, for example, is a maze where the entire level looked the same. There are so many long paths that just lead to a dead end. I just wanted to find the exit. The overall level design could have been much more diverse. Sound effects consisted of the blips and bloops of the PC speaker. There's no music to listen to, so much of the game will be silent. There's really not much I could say about this, other than I would have liked more sound. The graphics were adequate for its time. The tiles were detailed and the levels had background scenery. They only used 16 colors, but this was common at the time. After the game's initial release, it came to Apogee's attention that Duke Nukem was actually a character in the 1990 cartoon series Captain Planet and the Planeteers. To avoid a potential lawsuit, Apogee renamed their Duke Nukem character, replacing the E in Nukem with a U. It was later revealed that the name was never actually copyrighted, so Apogee reverted to the original spelling and continued to use it in successive games and other media. The episodes themselves were standalone games. This was a bit of a hassle at the time, since you had to quit the program, change directories, and run a different program in order to play a different episode. This was how some games were organized at the time. The only upside to this that I can see was that it kept the shareware episode separate from paid episodes. The entire game is 3 episodes, each with 10 levels, with the first episode distributed free of charge. Personally, I think this game would be better suited on the NES. I say this because the controls and graphics would be perfect for it, and it would probably have music on top of all that. But that all changes with its sequel 2 years later, Duke Nukem II.
I am back.
Duke Nukem is abducted by aliens during his TV interview. Their plan was to use his brain to take over the world, but when you have an alien ass kicker on an alien ship, that spells trouble for them. The gameplay has notable improvements from its predecessor. You can shoot up and down now, which made it less of a hassle to deal with airborne enemies. You have access to new weapons, such as lasers, a rocket launcher, and a flamethrower. When fired downwards, the flamethrower can also be used to propel you to higher platforms. On some levels, you take control of a flying vehicle that fires powerful lasers. The game has a checkpoint you can activate in each level that allows you to respawn there should you die. The enemies you encounter also offer a more diverse challenge. You end up jumping and ducking to avoid their attacks, and in the case of these robo-spiders, you have to shake them off quickly to avoid taking further damage. Although the game took advantage of 256 color VGA graphics, it only used 16 colors, swapping between a handful of color palettes for each level. The sprites are much larger and more detailed, and the backgrounds scroll as well. The graphics just look good enough to get the job done. The high-energy soundtrack does help keep you pumped while you play the game, and the sound effects give you the impression that the game should be played at an arcade. Though it does offer ad-lib and PC speaker sound if you don't have a Sound Blaster card. Even though the game has obvious advancements and improved features compared with the first game, I believe that becomes a moot point when you consider the problems it introduced. The biggest problem is the scrolling. While the larger sprites have more graphical details, it takes up valuable real estate on the screen. Combined with Duke's fast movement speed, it becomes difficult to react to anything that appears as you move. The worst thing about this is the vertical scrolling. You have to adjust the screen manually with the up and down keys. It adds unnecessary complexity, and it's annoying to do this in a simple 2D side-scroller. You have a radar that shows items and enemies as white dots. This would have been extremely useful, except for the fact that it only shows you what you already see on the screen. It doesn't show you what's off-screen to give you early warning about any potential threats, which is the whole point of any radar system. This is just a useless feature that takes up valuable space on the screen. The game also suffers from the same level design problems as its predecessor. The quality seems too inconsistent. Some levels have some platforming sections, some linear parts, and open areas for fighting lots of enemies, and I enjoyed them. Some levels are mazes that have you traveling to the same places looking for an obscure key, or had wave after wave of enemies coming for you. This was frustrating, and at times, I just wanted to stop playing. Unlike the first game, Duke Nukem II had all 4 episodes contained in a single program. Each episode had 8 levels, and of course, the first episode was free. In the end, both games were more or less equal, but had different pros and cons. It was easier to see things as you moved in Duke Nukem 1, but you couldn't aim up or down, and it only had PC speaker sound effects. Duke Nukem 2 had much better controls and decent graphics, music, and sound, but the scrolling made it somewhat more difficult to play. Overall, I personally did not like the games. The level design just felt rudimentary, and the problems with certain features, or even a lack of them, made the gaming experience less enjoyable for me. But a lot of other people have thoroughly enjoyed the games, and the gameplay is good enough that I can understand why. I'll just take a step back and say I'm in the minority on this. In any case, the Duke Nukem games were side-scrollers that your kids could probably enjoy. After all, the games were good enough and successful enough that it warranted a third game.